Okay, so let's move on to cumulative enrollment, the homeless reporting, and RFEP collection. Okay, so part of end of year three, before at the start, when end of year three was introduced, we only had discipline, and then absence summary was added in, and then later on, cumulative enrollment, and then the CD decided to combine all of those plus homeless and RFEP at the same time because it makes sense, right? Because everyone has to be accounted for homelessness, and also RFEP is normally reported at the end of the year or based on the summative testing. Okay, so let's discuss cumulative enrollment. So cumulative enrollment is a count of all students with an open enrollment that overlaps the academic year period. So and which extends up to August 15. So what does this mean? So any enrollment that overlaps July 1st, 2024 up to June 30, 2025, regardless if it's from the prior academic year or the current year will be part of the cumulative enrollment. Now, for the adjustive cumulative enrollment, this just pertains to all enrollments that are in the current academic year. Okay. So, what is the use of cumulative enrollment? So, the cumulative enrollment is derived from your student enrollment record in CalPADS. Okay. So, this is used as the denominator for different rates that are presented and computed in the California dashboard. So you have your suspension rate, which is technically the number of suspensions over the number of enrollment during that year, or over the cumulative enrollment. Could also be expulsion, number of total count of expulsion over total cumulative enrollment. And then chronic absenteeism is the same. And then truancy and stability rate, total number of days. So ADA independent study days will be part of the total attendance days. So if there are absences based on, let's say, missed coursework, if you're doing coursework, then that would be reflected in that. What does CalPAS expect to receive on the stats record when a student receive a half day suspension?
Nothing.
That
The status suspension days is when the student misses a full day of instruction. Generally speaking, although we don't collect ADA and CalPADs, if the student generated ADA for a day of attendance, that your systems give that student a day of attendance in the STAS. That's the guidance that was given when they created the STAS file. So it follows that. And if you think about it logically, uh, if Kyron beats me up in fourth period and I was there the first three periods, I was there, right? And so you didn't miss the instruction, which is the point of the chronic absenteeism and the STAS. And there's no validations. There's for day per day between the stats and discipline because there are going to be a 3 day suspension might look like in all reality 2 full days and 1 half day and only be reported as 2 days in the stats. So we don't do a day for day validation.
so we have the homeless counts. So the homeless counts are basically your program 191. So these are students that are homeless based on different categories of homelessness that you need to report in CalPAS for during the entire academic year. So if a student was homeless even just one day, it is important that you report those. That way they would be included and also would benefit from different services that students may get from the fact that they were homeless. So any student who was homeless from July 1st up to June 30 in the current academic year should be reported. I think majority of your students are now in CalPADS since you have been updating, your student profile. However, if you still have homeless students, we expect that you report them to CalPADS before certifying end of year three. So again, homelessness would basically would include the date the student was homeless, the last day the student was considered homeless, as well as the different dwelling types, and if the student is an unaccompanied youth. So for the dwelling types, the CalPAS code sets, and I think there is a hidden slide after this that provides you the different definitions of the homeless dwelling type. Then also there is, if you would also refer to Flash 295, the CDE sent up or sent out a guidance with regards to the recent Southern California wildfires. So if you haven't read that yet, please do so. And that could probably provide you additional information on whether a student may qualify as homeless or not. Let's move on to RFEP. For the RFEP status, students who are considered RFEP, meaning when an EL student is tested this year using the summative LPAC testing, if all four criteria specified in Ed Code 313F is met and the student receive a level 4 on the summative LPAC, then the student is considered a reclassified fluent English proficient student. So upon determination of reclassification, it is important that you submit the RFEP to CalPADS. That way, they will be included in this year's reporting. Also, unlike EL and IFEP, where TOMS transmit that status to CalPADS, for RFEPs, LEAs are expected to submit the data directly to CalPADS through your SIS. And the benefit of having the student reclassified, of course, is that student will no longer be taking summative testing for the next consecutive years because basically RFEP is a terminal status for an EL student. And of course, it takes out the student from being considered at risk of being part of the long-term um, EL classification. This guide is just more guidance on how RFEPs are reported. So in normal times, if a student was RFEP close to the end of the year or during the summative testing window and you get the scores, then of course you report the RFEP SIGA status right away. However, if a student was reclassified at the last days of school and the student will no longer be coming back to the district next year, then the RFEP status date should be the last day of school. That way, the student would be accounted for in your RFEP reports. Now, if a student was reclassified as RFEP during the last day of school, summer or at any point outside of the enrollment period, and you expect the student to be accounted for at your school, and you expect the student to come back next year, then use the first day of school next year as the RFEP status date. Okay, so these are just some guidance that you should be aware of. There is a link to the flash in the notes if you want to get additional information on that. All right, so this SIGA status reminder, if you've attended the regional meetings, this was presented there as well. It is just a reminder that students will no longer be able to use their 23-24 results for reclassification after May 31, 2025. So it is important that for students who may be reclassified based on their 23-24 scores, CD recommends that the testing them no later than May 15, 2025 to ensure that the students are included in your collection. Okay. So LEAs are recommended to update the RFEP status in CalPADS by May 15 and ensure students transferring have updated records in CalPADS within 10 days. So bottom line is if you have these students who has 2023-24 summative testing scores, make sure that you do the necessary testing and adjustments. That way, that would ensure that your students, RFEP status is accounted for in this current academic year. So with regards to RFEP as well, we mentioned that the RFEP, the sooner you report the student's RFEP status, the better, because it will take out the student from being at risk to be an LTEL, right? Long term EL student. So, why are we emphasizing this? Because starting this year, actually, even at this point, CalPads is already collecting, at least on the ODS side, students who are potentially LTEL students. Okay. So, to be able to, be proactive on this, we recommend you either look at your ODS 8.1 to see if the student has a is still EL, and based on the EL days, you could probably determine who are your potentially long-term EL students, or you could also download the cumulative enrollment extract. So what is the cumulative enrollment extract? So it's an ODS extract that includes additional data that would help you identify if a student is potentially an LTL or long-term EL. So we go to, let me just bring up tests here, and go to my extracts. I go to ODS extracts. Let me just, and I download this CENR. Okay, just populate the required field. So if it's just this current year, you could do that. And then also, if you just want to get the list of students that are, for this current academic year, check the adjusted cumulative enrollment. So request a file. So you should be able to download the file. And then the user manual has a batch template that you could use to be able to bring up the file in a more, legible or understandable report. So go to resource. Oh no, not resource. Yeah, go to resource, go to batch file templates, extract templates, and then download this CNR extract template. Or you can just type here CNR extract template under search. So what does this do? So let me just bring up the file I had yesterday in here, downloads. So if I just click on import and pick the file that I downloaded, it provides you this information here. So new this year are these columns. So you have here, let me just increase the screen here. So you have here these new columns on the CNR. So ideally, or in theory, you download this file and import it into your SIS, and your SIS would be able to determine if a student is a potential LTL. So you have here the dates, you have here the EL status start date, you have here the initial US enrollment date, earliest enrollment start date, and then earliest EL start date. So, but this is basically what is identified. So look at this column, provisional LTL start date. So you will have three dates that CalPAS will consider, but then this date will basically be able to identify what date was used for the student to be considered as LTL. Okay, so look at this. Was um the student was EL on 8/17/2020 or 2017, and so the reason why, and so that's basically what, 7 years. And so that's the reason why the student is LTL. So ideally, this file, if you request it, download and import into your SIS should be able to identify any potential LTLs. And so the vendors have been notified about this. And so that way you don't have to figure the dates out yourselves. So this, and then you have the ODS extra, your cohort as well for your seniors that are in the cohort year. These reports and extracts would be the reports that you would use for LTEL. So if you have additional questions on this, then this can be more documentation would be available for that. You could go to the extracts, reports, and then go to cumulative enrollment. So there is documentation to explain the different dates or logic for this status. Okay. All right. So moving on. So we have the one-year grad and completer collection. So this is essentially your graduates for this current academic year. So the report provides a count of graduates and completers, which is used for reporting one-year grads and completers in DataQuest, and helps LEAs identify potential issues with their graduate counts before certification. So what does this say? Before certifying, make sure that your 122 and 123, the student list, are accurate. You've accounted for all of your students who should be graduates this year before certifying. Okay? And then since cohort is picked up the week after, right? So it is important that you make sure that you certify your grads and completers with accurate data. That way you don't have to fudge or adjust or make adjustments in your ODS file, and that there would be a discrepancy between the ODS cohort reports as well versus the one-year grad completion. Okay. All right, so we have graduate exemptions. What is graduate exemptions? This is just basically an indicator in your SCNR file. When you submit or close out your SCNR at the end of the year, you would then identify if a student is a graduation exemption eligible student. So what does this mean? So SB 532 essentially exempts students based on this eligibility on the table here from needing to fulfill additional local graduation requirements. So there is a state requirement for graduation, minimum requirements, as long as this eligible student subgroup meets the state requirements, then they should automatically be included as a E23100, and then mark them as a yes if there are additional requirements that they may have not met, but they are exempt for that requirement. Okay. So make sure that you know what this indicator means. That way you would be able to differentiate those students from your other students who met all requirements, including your local requirements. All right, so as I've mentioned, the cohort re-enrollment reminder. So since there is a week since the certification deadline is different from the cohort collection deadline, there's a gap week between those two collections. It is important that you make sure that all of your end of year three enrollments, complete enrollment exits are properly reported by August 15 and certified. And then, of course, you have to make sure that any students that are coming back next year, if you have students who are in the cohort, let's say you have 12 graders who are expected to return the next year, and you've exited them as an E155, please make sure that they have a future enrollment reported in CalPAS before the cohort deadline. The reason behind this is that if a student was exited with an E155 and the student does not have a future enrollment reported before this August 15 collection, those students will be considered as a dropout. So if you have students who are coming back for transition services or coming back for, just for a fifth year, make sure that you have a re-enrollment record in there. Otherwise, CalPADS, as in the cohort reporting, will consider them as a dropout. So that's just a reminder. It's still in April. So you have still a whole lot of time to be able to prepare for this. and be able to anticipate who are your potential fifth year seniors and who would be exited or completing high school by the end of June. So you should be able to know by then who the students are, and then maybe you only have a few left for those students who are still completing high school up during the summer to complete those requirements. So by then you should be able to know who needs a future enrollment once you exit the students. Okay?
Kyron,
Yes, sir.
Rebecca wants you to emphasize would 12th graders use the E155 or E156?
Yes, that's what I. Yeah, for 12 graders who are expected to return in the next year. Yeah, yeah, the
E156.
E156. Yeah, use E156, and then for E156 use and submit a new enrollment start dates. For any fifth year senior, regardless of if they're sped or not, if they are returning for another 12 grade, use E156. Okay. So make sure that
Yeah,
that,
Cal. I was gonna say CalPads will give you an error if you use E155.
yeah, yeah, you're right. Too many changes in CalPads now. So yes, use E156 for returning students next year. However, make sure that you have their new enrollment record for the new year reported for them as well. So that way they will be classified as still enrolled rather than a dropout in the cohort reports. That's correct, Rebecca. All right. So that's my part. And I guess
No, you're not done yet, buddy.
I'm not done yet. What else?
Can you revisit the cumulative enrollment extract? Um,
Okay, let's go there.
you don't have to do as thoroughly as you did it, but this is the first time we've ever referred anybody to looking for LTEL information. So just point out the extract where you got it and what you're looking at again. That would be great.
All right, let's do another demo.
Eh,
Okay, so go to where's my so what I did was I went to the extracts page. I went to ODS extracts. I click on the cumulative enrollment ODS download, and it should bring this up. So you have here multiple, you know, tabs, but to simplify the demo, you choose the current academic year, and then you pick the schools, and then, if you just want the enrollments for this current year, check this box. If not, leave it as is. If you want CalPads to email you when the download is ready, check this box and then put your email here and then request file. Once you have that, you've done that, you should be able to download the file. And then, the file normally comes up as a text file, right? If your if your SIS is already configured to be able to pick it up and then present you that report in a legible manner internally in your SIS, then by all means just go and import that into your SIS. If not, we provided a template for that. You just go to help, go to batch file template download. It should bring you to this part here. So click on extract templates, click on this CNR extract template. The template, once you download the template, so when I use the template, I do have a security issue here like this one, right? So what you do is maybe request your IT person to just allow this to be accepted by the system. So you can right click on the file, go to properties, and then there is an unblock option here. If this is grayed out, then you may want to ask your IT person to unblock it to help you be able to download the file automatically. Or you can just copy the heading in that file, put it in a spreadsheet, and then convert the file, the extract that you had downloaded. But bottom line is, once you have an you know updated or allowed that file, just click on import it, pick the file, and then it would generate these columns. Now these columns here, again, are, you have 5 different dates, right? So we go to this SSID just to show you why CalPAS determined this as a potential LTL. See, the student was EL since 2017. They never attained an RFEP status. So see how the student was there on 2017, and then they probably disappeared, move out of state or country, and then came back in 2020. But during this time of enrollment at your district, the student was never reclassified, or if they tested, then they failed reclassification levels. And so the student was LTL. And so the definition for this LTL can also be determined in the user manual. If you go to resource glossary, there is an LTL definition here. So you have here your long-term English learner's start date. So this is how it is defined or determined. There is a formula for that. So this is how it is determined. And so based on that, this file will then pick that LTL start date and then use that as a potential LTL student. So
That's it.
yeah,
I was going to say the key thing is Kyron is saying potential, and I don't want you guys to overlook his use of that word.
yeah.
The CalPADS definition that's in the glossary is different than what is used for the dashboard and different from what is used for DataQuest
Mhm.
because we're trying not to miss anyone. And so we don't use either definition. We're trying to find anyone that is a potential LTL. So you still, once you identify these students, want to confirm, do they meet a dashboard definition or the DataQuest definition? But we're trying to make sure that any potential LTL can be seen and you have, you know, visibility. Sorry,
Yeah,
Kyron.
yeah, that's great. Thank you for making it for simplifying that statement with that statement. So yeah, so this is new. So this year it's all either an ODS. That information can be determined through ODS 515.2, which is the cohort extract, or the CNR extract. Next year, I believe requirements will be including that in the 1.21 report on all of the snapshot reports. So watch out for that change next year. But for now, these are all just extracts. That way you can download that extract, look at your potential LTLs, and make sure that they are, RFEPs are accounted for those students who really reclassified as RFEP. That way it takes them out of that LTL status. If not, then I guess you guys have to, make sure the students learn English to be able to fulfill a reclassified status.
You have completed this module. Please continue to the next video. Thank you.